Howdy, folks. Spencer here, and today I want to talk about the upcoming lockbox ship that we are getting on September 13th, 2022, and that is the Courier Pilot Raider. Chapters will be listed down below if you want to skip ahead to talking points about different aspects of the ship, like the trader console, so skip ahead if you want to just hear about those specific things. So, first off, where does this ship come from? Well, the Courier Pilot Raider was seen in Season 3, Episode 1 of Discovery at the very beginning of the episode. It was the ship that was chasing Book just as he ran into Michael, who was going through the wormhole to move to the 32nd century. So it was shown for a couple seconds at the start of that episode, and I think that was the only time in the season that we saw the ship. I could be wrong, but it wasn't a ship that I recall having, a very long-term presence on the show. So for the ship itself, we have a standard raider setup with 5 forward weapons, 1 aft weapon, and an experimental weapon. We have 2 engineering consoles, 4 science and 5 tactical. For the experimental weapon that it has, they're called rotor rockets. And the visual on these, we don't know the damage performance of them yet. The tooltip did not have the information over on the test server for them when they were showing it off on stream. But Sporticus said that he would have that fixed by the time it actually goes live. These fire off a bunch of little like rockets or little torpedoes that have a very similar animation to the Kelvin torpedoes. If I look at 10 forward here, you see these little blue torpedoes that are going towards the target. That is this experimental weapon. The damage that they were doing in on the stream was not that spectacular, so I don't really have high expectations for their performance, but they do certainly look really cool. And they did say that they have 100% shield pen, but based on the damage they did in this stream, I highly doubt that they're going to be anything really worthwhile. So the next aspect of the ship to look at is the bridge officer seating. And for this, I'm going to use Fleffel's sortable filterable ship list and compare it to other raiders that we already have access to. So the Courier Pilot Raider has a Commander Tactical with pilot seating, 2 Lieutenant Commander Universal seats, a Lieutenant Universal with Miracle Worker, and an Ensign Universal. These Raider ships generally have a ton of universal seating, as you can see. And there are some ships that are comparable, but there are none that have a combo of Pilot and Miracle Worker like this has. Now, Pilot and Miracle Worker in this type of combination are not going to be the most appealing option for those of you looking for a raider to take into PvE content. But Pilot and Miracle Worker in this combination may have value for those of you that like to PvP. With Pilot, you're getting your attack pattern lambda, and with the Miracle Worker, you're going to be getting your narrow sensor bands, which is popular in PvP because it can give you immunity to confuses and placates for 10 seconds. So the bridge officer seating leans more towards someone interested in PvP rather than PvE. For those of you that want a really good PvE raider, the Terran Adamant in the C store is something that you can get for a fraction of the cost that this courier is going to cost, and it's got a better seating for PvE. The Terran Adamant has a much higher damage potential because of the Intel seat and temporal seat. So Courier will have its advantage in PvP, but the Adamant and several of the other Raider options are going to have a much higher performance potential when it comes to PvE. Now, for the hull capacity, shield mod, all that, the Courier does have a weaker hull than many of the other Raiders that are out there. You see here it's got a 0.9 hull modifier, which means compared to the Terran Adamant, it's got 10,000 less hull at its base values. And the shield mod is slightly better than most of the other raiders on the market, but I would rather have a higher hull modifier than having slightly better shields on a raider. Mobility has got 19 turn rate, an impulse modifier of 0.22, and 85 inertia. 85 inertia is one of the highest out there for raiders. The only other raider here that has an 85 inertia rating is the McKee Raider. But the difference between 75 inertia and 85, in my opinion, is not that large. So realistically, any of these ships, any of these raiders that are on this list are going to have extremely good maneuverability. They'll stop when you want them to stop, and they'll move when you want them to move. So given the stats here for the Courier compared to the other raiders on the market, it is a bit of a tough sell, especially given that the Courier is going to be in its own lockbox. You know, this ship is going to be really costly compared to the other options. You're probably going to be looking at about 1 billion EC for the Courier, whereas you could just go out and get the Terran Adamant Heavy Raider for $30 in the C store, and it's unlocked account wide. Whereas this Courier Pilot Raider, being a lockbox ship, is going to be, you know, like 1 billion EC for a single character. So not the most affordable option, and the actual stats of the ship do not really warrant the price tag, in my opinion. Now let's talk about the trait, special delivery. The trait will give you a cooldown reduction for pilot bridge officer abilities when you activate a pilot maneuver, and activating pilot to bridge officer abilities or pilot maneuvers will spawn in 3 photon mines behind your ship. Here's the issue with this. You know, with a raider like this, you're not going to be setting up a torp boat on it. And most of the really good torp boats don't have pilot seating. You would usually want to have command and intel, command and temporal, command and merc worker. You would basically want any other seating than pilot on a torp boat. Now, I'm going to go through and take a look at what torp boats we have that have pilot seating. So for this, I'm going to look for ships that have at least a lieutenant commander merc worker and any rank of pilot. So these are the ships that you could set up as torp boats that you could also use this trait on. And the reason this list is so limited is because for a torp boat to be really effective, you need to have concentrate firepower 3 on the ship. Not having concentrate firepower on your torp boat will result in you're just losing out on half your damage potential. Concentrate firepower is huge for torpedo builds because it marks, when you mark it on a target and you keep hitting that target, it gives you a ton of high yields that you get to shoot out. So not having it on is crippling your ship's capability as a torp boat. So looking at the platforms here, the Undine Kuavi is probably the best one for actually using as a torp boat. It's got a full commander command seat and then a lieutenant commander pilot seat. So you could use this trait on this ship, but then that's where the other issue is with this trait. It's really going to be hard to justify using it on a torpedo build because we already have so many amazing traits for torpedoes. You've already got, you know, 7 or 8 different traits that are like must have just to slot on a torp ship before this one. And yeah, it's just really hard to justify putting it on to just get a couple extra mines out. So realistically, this trait is going to have very little value because you're not going to really want to use it on a pilot ship because you're not going to be able to really boost what you're getting from those mines. And you're not going to really be running this on torpedo boats because it requires pilot abilities on the torpedo build. And there's just not a ton of platforms that you would do that on. The Undine Kuavi is certainly the best out of the bunch if you wanted to do that. But then the other issue is you already have better traits when you're starting to look at, lockbox ships. Like, when you have enough resources that you're looking at a trait like this is a lockbox ship trait. So, uh, there are better traits you could get for your money, like universal designs, Terran Goodbye. The traits that are providing you with the damage boost or crit boost, those are going to have much more impact for your performance on a tort boat than this would. So, unfortunately, I do like the trait. Its idea, that the idea behind it is nice, but it is severely limited because of the abilities that trigger it. So, unfortunately, I'm going to have to say to pass on this trait. Now, for the console, we have a passive resistance boost here for physical and kinetic damage, and that will start to scale up if your throttle is above 50%. And the second passive is a little bit confusing, and like I've asked other people about this, and we're not quite sure yet. We won't find out until we actually have it, but it says plus 21.4% plasma damage with energy weapons. Now, the thing is if this was specifically boosting plasma, you know, plasma energy weapon damage, it would be worded differently. So either this is just cryptic typing it in, just in a different format, or the other possibility is that this is just giving you additional damage on top of whatever energy weapon damage you do. We really don't know. We won't find out until it launches, but given the percentage here, I imagine that this is just them messing up the wording. When I go look at the plasma weapons over on the wiki, you see that the wording usually is plus X amount plasma energy weapon damage. So they are breaking with that tradition if that is the case, and they've just worded it differently here. So the wording is a little bit confusing. I imagine it's just them just messing up from breaking from the traditional formatting they do. Uh, but there's definitely been some talk and some people being curious as to whether or not this is actually adding additional damage that is plasma on top of your energy weapons. And I imagine it's just a formatting typo. Now, the actual clicky of the debris screen it's a bit funky. It's giving you an immunity shield in front of your ship that will make you immune to a specific amount of physical and kinetic damage in the forward 90-degree arc for 30 seconds or until the immunity shield capacity has been used up. That capacity is based on your hull capacity. So if you take this and use it on a tankier ship that's got a lot of HP, then the amount that you're going to get from that immunity shield is going to be higher. It's also going to give you a flight speed and turn rate boost. And if you ram into a foe during those 30 seconds, it will consume the entire capacity left for that immunity shield and deal that as damage to the target. Now, this is going to be interesting for those of you that are into builds where you ram opponents, but from a practical standpoint, if you use this, on a ship that's got like 200,000 HP, this is only going to be doing like 200,000 damage every 2 minutes for you. So, maybe you have some really niche situation where that will matter more for you, but 200,000 damage is just a couple weapon hits in the current state of the game. So this really, the damage from this is not that relevant. And I view this as more of a fun console. Now, the wording here, I'd really like to know again with the passive if the wording is just like a formatting typo, but that second line on the passive it's really confusing the hell out of me, to be honest. Let me know what your interpretation of that is, because like I said, it breaks from the norms that they have with this, and I imagine it's just like a formatting typo. But I think that's it really for the ship. So, I want to say, or just answer the question of, do I think it's worth it? The answer is no. I do not think that you should go out and get this ship. I think if you want a raider, The Terran Adamant in the C store costs you $30, and you get that on account-wide unlock. And I know the Terran Adamant has a higher damage potential than this Courier Pilot Raider. So it's a really hard ship to justify. Its damage potential is lower than Raiders than you can get in the C store. The trait from it is limited based off of what triggers it. And the console really just looks like a fun type console. It doesn't look like it's really going to be that crazy unless the passive on it is actually adding additional damage, which I highly doubt. I think that's just a typo, like I said. Market impact wise, I don't think this ship's going to sell that well. I really don't. I think that this Courier Pilot Raider is going to be very cheap on the exchange if you're patient. Based on information I got earlier about the other contents in the lockbox, I don't think the lockbox is going to be popular at all. I'm not aware of any new space weapons with the lockbox. Most of the traits don't look like they're going to have much relevance for the majority of players. The DOFs the DOFs look to be more PvP focused. I think the entire lockbox is going to be fairly underwhelming. I think every major lockbox opener is going to continue opening Infinity lockboxes, and they are going to steer very clear away from this thing. I'm not impressed by it. I don't think the stats are good enough to warrant you spending like hundreds of bucks gambling for it. I think if you wait a month or so on the exchange, this thing's going to be under $1 billion. I would not be surprised if this ends up being the type of lockbox ship where we see it on the market at 6 to 700 million EC here in a month or so. So if you want this ship or any of the contents from the lockbox, which I can't talk about until they do the blog for, then, I would say just to sell your keys, get EC, and just buy the items off the exchange for EC. A lot of casual players are going to go through and open this lockbox regardless of the advice that I give. And I really, now having seen the items in it, I do not think you open this lockbox. I think you steer very far away from it. And if you really want this ship, you take advantage of the people that are opening it, and you pay them a very small amount on the exchange when they post it up there and see that the market is flooded with like 100 of these things. So yeah, that's going to be it for this video. Let me know what you think about the ship. Are you going to pick one up? Does it actually do the stats on it look crazy good to you? Actually, before I go, I did forget to say, this thing's got like a spinny effect. So that's something else to consider if you're actually looking to fly it, is that this thing spins left and right, which means that it's going to irritate the shit out of some people. So there's some people saying it's going to make them, look dizzy, and I understand, having watched it fly on 10 forward here. I can't recommend the ship. It's not good enough at the end of the day. But I'll be streaming tomorrow if you want to ask me any questions, and if you want to ask any questions about the ship, feel free to ask them down below. I'm not going to get one unless they're really cheap on the exchange. But yeah, it's definitely, to me, I don't get why they did this as a lockbox ship over doing like a Confederacy lockbox. I do not think that this is going to be a very successful lockbox, and I do not think that this is going to be a ship that you see a ton of flying around. But that's going to be it for today. Thank you for watching. See you guys next time.